Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Secrets channel. Tonight we step quietly into a frozen wilderness where survival is not guaranteed, where every breath turns to mist and every sound feels like it might betray you. Imagine being cast out far from warmth and law with nothing but what you carry and what you can take. How do you sleep when the ground itself steals your heat? How do you eat when the land is locked beneath ice? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, how long can you last before the cold wins? So before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And while you're here, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Now dim the lights. You move carefully through a forest that feels both silent and alive. Snow presses down on every branch, muting the world into a soft, endless hush. Each step sinks with a quiet crunch, the sound startlingly loud to your own ears. You quickly learn that even this small noise matters. Out here, sound travels strangely across the cold air, stretching farther than it should. The air bites at your face, it stings your lungs with every inhale. You pull your rough cloak tighter, though it offers only a thin argument against the cold. Beneath your boots, the ground is hard as stone, locked by frost that has not lifted for weeks. You are not here by choice. In the medieval world, being declared an outlaw was more than punishment. It was erasure. You were stripped of protection of rights of identity within society. Anyone could harm you without consequence. The forest becomes your refuge and your prison. Historians widely agree that outlawry in medieval Europe often forced individuals into remote woodlands, especially during winter months when travel was limited and villages were heavily guarded. Yet some scholars still debate how many outlaws truly survived long-term in such conditions, suggesting that many stories exaggerate their endurance. You pause for a moment. The forest smells faintly of pine resin and damp bark, but beneath it lingers something sharper. Cold has a scent clean and almost metallic, like iron left out in snow. It fills your nose and settles at the back of your throat. Your fingers are already stiff. You flex them, trying to keep feeling alive in your hands. Without constant movement, the body begins to surrender heat, starting with the extremities. Medieval outlaws knew this well, even if they lack the language to explain it. They learned through pain, through frostbitten skin, through loss, and sometimes through death. A faint breeze slips through the trees, carrying a whisper of shifting branches. You freeze instinctively, not from fear alone, but from habit. Movement draws attention. Stillness at least gives you a chance to listen. Nothing follows. Still, your heart beats faster, now thudding against your ribs in a way that feels too loud for comfort. You exhale slowly, watching the vapor drift away like a ghost abandoning you. It is late afternoon. Already the light is fading. Winter days are cruelly short. The sun barely lifts itself above the horizon before slipping away again, leaving long hours of darkness behind. Darkness in this world is not simply the absence of light, it is a presence, a weight. And you are not ready for it yet. You keep moving. There is a reason for that. Experienced outlaws understood that stopping too early meant losing precious warmth, while stopping too late meant building shelter in the dark. Neither option was ideal. Timing, like everything else out here, becomes a delicate calculation. Your stomach tightens. Hunger is already there, a dull, persistent ache that reminds you how little you have. Food in winter is scarce. Plants lie dormant beneath the snow, and animals are harder to track, their movements cautious and unpredictable. Some outlaws relied on trapping small creatures like rabbits, though success was never guaranteed. There are stories half-whispered and rarely confirmed of desperate fugitives gnawing on tree bark or boiling leather scraps to soften them enough to eat. Whether entirely true or slightly embellished, such tales hint at the extremes people were pushed to endure. You glance at the ground. Tracks, not yours. A series of small indentations, curves between the trees partially filled with fresh snow. Animal tracks, possibly a hare, possibly something else. You crouch, brushing lightly against the surface, feeling how recently they were made. Still soft. Recent then. You feel a flicker of cautious hope, but hope can be dangerous. Chasing it blindly wastes energy, and energy is everything. For now you mark the direction in your mind and rise again, choosing to continue forward. The wind shifts. This time it carries a different scent, faint but unmistakable. Smoke. You stop immediately. Your body reacts before your thoughts catch up, muscles tightening, breath slowing. Smoke means fire. Fire means people. And people for someone like you rarely mean safety. Yet fire also means warmth, a difficult choice. Medieval outlaws often walked this thin line between risk and survival. Some approached distant fires, cautiously hoping to steal embers or scavenge abandoned camps. Others avoided them entirely, knowing that guards and hunters also relied on fire to endure the same cold nights. Historians still argue whether outlaw groups maintained hidden, semi-permanent camps during winter, or if they remained constantly mobile to avoid detection. The truth likely varied, shaped by terrain, resources, and sheer luck. You stand there longer than you should. The cold creeps in during hesitation. It always does. Finally you turn away from the scent. Not tonight. Your body needs shelter first. Without it, even a fire will not save you. Wind strips heat faster than flame can replace it, and exposed skin will suffer before the night reaches its deepest hours. The forest begins to thicken. Branches hang lower here, weighed down by snow. The space feels tighter, more enclosed, as if the trees themselves are closing ranks. It offers some protection from the wind, though it also limits visibility. A trade-off. You step over a fallen log, its surface glazed with ice, and notice the hollow beneath it. Not large, not comfortable, but shielded. You kneel down. The snow here is slightly shallower, disturbed by the shape of the log above. You brush it aside with numb hands, revealing frozen earth beneath. Hard, but at least it will not collapse under your weight. This could work. Barely. You sit back on your heels, listening again. The forest answers with silence broken only by the distant creak of shifting wood. No voices, no footsteps, no immediate threat. Just cold. You begin to gather what you can. Small branches, dry needles, anything that might insulate you from the ground. You work slowly, deliberately, knowing that rushing leads to mistakes. And mistakes out here are rarely forgiven. Your breath fogs around you. The light continues to fade, and as the first shadows stretch across the snow, you realize something simple, something undeniable. This is only the beginning. You settle lower beneath the fallen log, adjusting your position, until the wood presses gently against your back. It is not comfortable. It was never meant to be, but it blocks the wind, and tonight that is enough. The cold seeps upward through the ground, slow and relentless. Even with the layer of needles and twigs you have gathered, you can feel it pressing into your bones. You shift slightly, trying to find a balance between stillness and circulation, knowing that too much movement wastes energy, while too little invites stiffness. Your cloak rustles softly, its rough wool worn thin in places and carries a faint scent of smoke and sweat. You pull it tighter around your shoulders, tucking your hands beneath its folds. Warmth in this world is not a constant thing. It comes in small, fragile pockets. You learn to trap it, guard it, stretch it as long as possible. Clothing for medieval outlaws was often the difference between endurance and collapse. Wool was the most common material, valued for its ability to retain heat even when damp. A thick cloak could serve as blanket, coat, and shelter all at once. Some fugitives layered multiple garments stolen or scavenged, creating bulky but effective insulation against the freezing air. Fur, when available, was even better. You run your fingers along the inner lining of your cloak, feeling the uneven patches where scraps have been stitched in. Not all of it matches. Some sections are coarser, others softer, hinting at different origins. A rabbit here, perhaps fox there, hard to tell now. But each piece matters. There are accounts suggesting that outlaws sometimes raided trap lines set by hunters stealing animal pelts before they could be collected. It was risky work and deeply resented by those who depended on those traps for survival. Yet desperation reshapes morality. Out here, warmth is not a luxury. It is survival itself. You tuck your chin down. Breathing into the fabric creates a small pocket of heat, warming the air before it reaches your lungs. It fogs the cloth, slightly leaving a damp patch that will freeze later if you're not careful. Still, for now, it offers relief, a small mercy. The wind shifts again, softer this time, brushing through the trees with a dry whisper. Snow loosens from higher branches, falling in quiet cascades that barely disturb the ground below. You watch it for a moment, noticing how it gathers in uneven drifts shaped by invisible currents. Snow is not just obstacle, it is also resource. Experienced outlaws learn to read it to understand how it could protect as much as it threatened. Packed snow, for instance, could be shaped into barriers that blocked wind surprisingly well. Loose snow could be piled along the sides of a shelter, creating insulation that trapped warmth inside. Historians generally agree that knowledge of snow use was borrowed from rural peasants and hunters, people who lived closer to the land. Still, there is ongoing debate about how sophisticated outlaw shelters became, with some suggesting they remained crude and temporary rather than carefully constructed. You reach out, brushing your hand against the snow beside you. It clings lightly to your skin before melting just enough to sting. Then the cold returns sharper than before. You withdraw your hand quickly, flexing your fingers again. Careful, even small exposures matter. Your boots creak as you shift your legs. They are stiff with frost, the leather hardened into an unyielding shell. Inside, your toes feel distant, as if they belong to someone else entirely. You wiggle them slowly, deliberately, forcing blood back into the space. Footwear, like everything else, tells a story. Many outlaws wore mismatched boots, pieced together from whatever they could find or take. Some wrapped their feet in cloth beneath the leather, adding layers that could be replaced when damp. Others used straw as insulation, stuffing it into gaps to hold warmth. There are even obscure references to fugitives lining their shoes with animal fur turned inward, creating a crude but effective barrier against the cold. Whether widespread or rare, the idea lingers as another example of adaptation born from necessity. You lean your head back against the log. The wood is cold but steady solid. Above you, the sky has dimmed into a deep fading grey. The last traces of daylight cling to the horizon, thin and fragile. Soon they will vanish entirely. Night comes quickly now. With it, the temperature drops further, as if the world itself is exhaling its final warmth. You can feel it happening, subtle but undeniable, a tightening in the air that seeps into every layer you wear. You pull your cloak tighter again. This time you draw your knees closer to your chest, curling inward to conserve heat. It is not a comfortable position, but it reduces the surface area exposed to the cold. A simple trick, an essential one. You hold still, listening. The forest has changed. Daytime sounds, faint as they were, have faded completely. In their place comes a deeper silence, broken only by occasional cracks from distant trees adjusting to the cold. It feels heavier now, more watchful, and colder. Your breath is slow. You count it without thinking, each inhale measured, each exhale controlled. It helps you stay calm. Panic wastes energy. Calm preserves it. There's a strange comfort in routine even here. Some outlaws develop small habits like this, quiet rituals to steady their minds during long nights. Counting breaths, whispering prayers, repeating fragments of songs remembered from another life. Faith too often followed them into exile. You notice a small object tied near your wrist, half hidden beneath your sleeve. A charm. Simple. Worn smooth by time. Perhaps it once meant more. Perhaps it still does. Historians note that many medieval people outlaw, or otherwise carried protective symbols, believing they could ward off harm or misfortune. Yet scholars continue to question how much of this belief was deeply held and how much was simply habit passed down without question. You rub the charm lightly between your fingers. It does not warm you, but it steadies you. A pause settles over everything. Then faintly you hear it. A distant howl. It stretches across the forest, low and echoing, rising and falling, in a way that sends a quiet tension through your chest. Wolves, not close, not yet, but present. You remain still. Predators are part of this world just as you are now. They hunt, they survive, they endure the same cold, the same hunger. In a way, you are not so different. The thought lingers, then fades. Your eyes grow heavier, not from comfort, but from exhaustion. The kind that settles deep, pulling you towards sleep even when you resist. Sleep in this cold is dangerous, too deep, and your body forgets to fight. You shift slightly, just enough to stay aware. The night stretches ahead long and uncertain. But for now you have shelter. You have warmth, however fragile, and you have made it through another day. Sometimes that is enough. You wake before you realize you've slept. Not fully rested, not comfortably, just pulled back from a shallow, uneasy drift by the cold pressing deeper into your body. Your shoulders ache, your legs feel stiff. For a moment you are unsure where you are. Then the forest returns. The darkness is thicker, now settled completely over the land like a heavy cloak. The faint grey of dusk has vanished, replaced by a sky that offers little light through the tangled branches above. You exhale slowly, watching your breath cloud and fade. Still here, still alive, a small victory. You shift carefully beneath the log, feeling the brittle crunch of frost beneath your weight. The thin layer of insulation you built earlier has flattened, offering less protection now. Cold seeps upward again, patient and unrelenting. You cannot stay like this. If you remain still for too long, the warmth you've preserved will drain away, and without some source of heat, the night will become harder to endure with each passing hour. You think of fire, not the roaring kind, not the kind that dances high and bright. That would be foolish, dangerous, easy to spot even at a distance, especially against the snow. No, what you need is something quieter, something hidden. You ease yourself out from beneath the log, moving slowly to keep your joints from protesting too loudly. The air bites harder now, sharper than before, as if the temperature has dropped another step into severity. Your boots press into the snow with a muted crunch. You pause after each step, listening. The forest answers only with the stillness. Good. You move a short distance away, scanning the ground for what you need. Firewood in winter is not always easy to find. Fresh branches are often damp or frozen solid, reluctant to burn. What you seek is dead wood, dry enough for you catch, small enough to manage. Your fingers brush against a fallen branch. You lift it, testing its weight, then snap it gently. A clean break, a soft, satisfying crack. That's a good sign, dry inside. You gather more. Thin twigs first, then slightly thicker pieces, building a small bundle against your chest. The wood scratches against your cloak, leaving faint marks you barely notice. Your focus narrows, drawn entirely to the task. Fire is not optional. It is skill, it is patience, it is survival. Medieval outlaws did not always have the luxury of flint and steel, though some certainly carried them when possible. Others relied on embers taken from previous fires, carefully preserved and coaxed back to life. There are even references to using fungus like tinder bracket to help catch sparks more easily. Historians generally agree that fire-making knowledge was widespread among rural populations, but how consistently outlaws could maintain it remains uncertain. Some scholars suggest that losing fire in winter could be a fatal mistake, forcing individuals into desperate and risky attempts to rekindle it. You kneel down. The spot you choose is partially shielded by a cluster of low branches, their snow-laden weight forming a natural barrier. It is not perfect, but it will help conceal light and break the wind. You clear a small patch of ground, snow scraped aside, earth exposed. You arrange the smallest twigs, first forming a loose nest, then slightly larger pieces around them, careful not to smother the space where the flame will need to breathe. Your hands move slowly, deliberately. There is no room for haste here. You reach into your cloak, retrieving what little you have kept dry. A scrap of cloth, a fragment of tinder brittle and fibrous. You place it gently at the center, adjusting it until it feels right. Then you prepare to strike. The motion is practiced, though not perfect. Metal against stone. A small sharp sound, a flicker of light that dies almost instantly. Again, another strike, another spark. Gone. You exhale, steadying yourself. Patience. The third attempt catches. Just barely. A faint glow touches the tinder hesitant. At first, then spreading slowly, feeding on the delicate fibers. You lean closer, shielding it with your hands, breathing gently to encourage it. Not too much. Too strong a breath will kill it. You watch. The glow deepens. A thin thread of smoke curls upward, barely visible against the dark. Then at last a small flame emerges, fragile and flickering. There it is. You feed it carefully, adding the smallest twigs one at a time, letting the fire grow without overwhelming it. It responds slowly, as if deciding whether to trust you. Eventually it does. The flame steadies. It remains low controlled, no higher than necessary. You adjust the branches around it, creating a shallow pit that hides most of the light. From a distance, it will be difficult to spot, especially with the cover above. This is how you survive. Quiet fire, hidden heat. You extend your hands toward it, feeling the warmth reach your skin. It is immediate, almost shocking. After hours of cold, even this small amount feels like a luxury. You close your eyes for a moment, just a moment. The smell reaches you next. Wood smoke, faint but comforting, mingling with the scent of resin as the branches begin to burn. It clings to your cloak, your hair, your skin. It marks you. That is the danger. Smoke carries. Even a small fire can betray your presence if the wind shifts the wrong way. Experienced outlaws learn to read those shifts to position their fires where the scent would disperse or be masked by the forest itself. You glance upward. The air feels still, for now. You remain alert. A distant sound breaks the quiet. Not a howl this time, not wind. Something else. A faint crack like a branch under weight. You freeze, every muscle tightening as your mind races through possibilities. Animal, falling snow, or something worse. You listen. Nothing follows. The silence returns heavier than before. You exhale slowly. Careful. Always careful. You shift closer to the fire, angling your body to capture as much warmth as possible without exposing yourself too much. Your back remains toward the log, the flame between you and the open forest. A calculated position. The heat begins to seep into you, loosening the stiffness in your fingers, easing the ache in your joints. It is not enough to fully warm you, but it pushes back against the cold. For now, that's enough. There are stories whispered in later years of outlaws mastering the art of nearly smokeless fires, using specific woods or techniques to minimize detection. Whether entirely true or shaped by imagination, such tales reflect the importance of secrecy in their survival. You watch the flame dance. Small, controlled, alive. It becomes something more than heat. It becomes company. Out here in the vast, cold silence, even a tiny fire feels like a presence beside you. A reminder that you are still capable of shaping your world even in the smallest way. You sit with it, listening to the soft crackle, feeling the warmth against your skin, breathing in the scent that now surrounds you. The night continues, but you are ready for it. The fire burns low behind you, steady and controlled, its faint warmth lingering as you shift your attention back to the cold pressing in from all sides. It is never enough on its own. Fire helps, yes, but without proper shelter it leaks away into the endless night. You glance at the fallen log again. It served you for a moment, a quick refuge against the wind, but it is not a place meant for a full night's survival. Already the cold beneath it has crept into your bones, and the space offers little room to adjust or improve your position. You need something better. Not bigger, not obvious, just smarter. You rise slowly, brushing frost from your cloak, and step carefully into the surrounding trees. The snow shifts beneath your boots with a soft, muffled crunch. Each sound feels louder than it should, echoing faintly through the still air. You pause, listen. Nothing answers. Good. Shelter for someone like you is not about comfort. It is about reducing loss. Heat, energy, visibility. Everything must be managed. You begin to scan the landscape with a more careful eye, not just seeing trees, but shapes, angles, possibilities. A low cluster of branches catches your attention. The tree above has grown unevenly, its limbs sloping downward on one side, nearly touching the ground. Snow has gathered thickly across the top, forming a natural barrier. Beneath it, the space is shallow but protected. You approach, slowly. The snow here is deeper, untouched by the wind, soft and powdery. You push through it, feeling it resist, then give way. Beneath the surface, the ground feels slightly warmer. Not warm exactly, just less frozen. That matters. You crouch down, peering into the space beneath the branches. It is dark enclosed and just large enough to hold you if you adjust your position carefully. This could work. You begin to clear it. Your hands move steadily, brushing away loose snow, packing some of it along the edges to reinforce the walls. The branches above hold their shape, supported by the weight of the snow resting on them. It creates a kind of roof, one that blocks wind and traps a small pocket of air inside. Snow, when used like this, becomes insulation rather than obstacle. Many medieval woodsmen understood this principle, and it is likely that outlaws borrowed such techniques, adapting them as needed. Still, historians remain uncertain about how frequently these methods were used, as written records rarely describe such practical details in depth. You shift your weight forward. The space is tight. You will need to curl inward much like before, but here the air feels different. Less exposed, less sharp. Already the wind's bite is softened. You continue working. Breaking small branches, you lay them across the ground to form a barrier between you and the frozen earth. It is uneven, imperfect, but it lifts you slightly, reducing the direct contact that steals heat from your body. A simple trick, but effective. You pause briefly, flexing your fingers. They ache now, the cold having settled deep into the joints. Each movement feels sheer more deliberate, as if your body is resisting the effort. You cannot stop me. Why? Not yet. You reach for more branches, arranging them along the open side of the shelter, creating a loose wall. Snow is packed against it, sealing gaps, thickening the barrier. The structure begins to take shape, crude but purposeful. You lean back, testing it. The space holds. Barely, but barely is enough. A faint scent of pine fills the air, stronger here beneath the branches. It mixes with the cold, creating a sharp, almost clean fragrance that lingers in your nose. You breathe it in slow and steady. It grounds you. There is a quiet satisfaction in this moment, small but real. You have shaped something, created a place where there was none. It is fragile, yes, but it is yours. For tonight, you crawl inside. The space closes around you immediately, the branches brushing against your cloak, the snow above dimming what little light remains. It is darker here, but also calmer. The wind is reduced to a distant whisper, barely reaching you. You shift into position, knees drawn in, cloak wrapped tightly, Cecil, hands tucked close to your chest. Every movement is measured, designed to conserve what little warmth you have gathered. Stillness returns, but this time it feels different, safer. You listen again. The forest continues its quiet rhythm. A faint creak here, a soft fall of snow there, distant, indistinct sounds that blend into a steady, almost soothing pattern. Then a small noise, closer this time, a faint rustle just beyond up the shelter. You freeze, your breath slows, nearly stopping as you focus on the sound. It comes again, soft and irregular, like something moving lightly across the snow. Not human, too quiet. You wait. The sound shifts, circling slightly, then fades into the distance. Perhaps a small animal searching for food beneath the surface, perhaps something else. Thing. You do not follow. Curiosity is dangerous. You remain still until the silence settles once more. Only then do you allow yourself to relax, just slightly easing the tension from your shoulders. Your body sinks deeper into the makeshift bed, the branches beneath you pressing unevenly against your back. Uncomfortable, but survivable. There are accounts scattered and uncertain of outlaws digging shallow pits into the snow itself, creating what some historians describe as primitive snow caves. These offered remarkable insulation, though they required time and energy to construct. Whether you would attempt such a thing depends on condition, strength, and necessity. Tonight this is an off. Your shelter holds. Your fire, though distant, still offers a faint reassurance. You can smell it just barely, the thin trace of smoke drifting through the trees. It reminds you that you are not entirely without warmth. You close your eyes briefly, not sleep, just rest. The cold is still there, pressing at the edges, testing the limits of what you have built. But it is held back for now by branches, by snow, by the careful choices you have made. You listen to your own breathing, slow, steady, alive. And as the night deepens around you, you understand something more clearly than before. Survival here is not one act. It is many small ones layered together, each as fragile as the last. The shelter holds its shape around you, a fragile pocket carved from branches and snow, and for a while you simply remain there, listening to your own breathing settle into a slow, steady rhythm that feels almost separate from the cold pressing at the edges of your body. Hunger returns gradually, not as a sharp pain, but as a hollow awareness that spreads through your stomach and chest, a reminder that warmth alone is not enough to carry you through the night. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the structure above you, and your hand brushes against your side where little remains to sustain you. Not much left. You already knew that. Medieval outlaws rarely had the luxury of stored provisions, especially in winter when food preservation was difficult and movement was restricted by both weather and watchful patrols. Most relied on what they could gather, trap, or steal, and in the frozen months each of those options became uncertain at best. You inhale slowly, catching the faint scent of pine mixed with the lingering trace of smoke from your fire. And beneath it all, something else, something emptier. The absence of food that your senses seem to recognize before your mind fully does. Hunger sharpens thought, but it also weakens you. You consider your options, though they are few, and none of them are easy. Moving now in darkness risks losing your shelter and exposing yourself to dangers you cannot see. Yet staying means enduring the slow drain of energy without replenishment. A difficult balance. You close your eyes briefly, not to sleep, but to think, letting your mind drift through what you remember, what you have learned, what others like you once did in moments like this. Some outlaws set simple snares, small loops of cord or fibre placed along narrow animal paths designed to catch creatures that moved predictably even in winter's grip. Historians widely accept that such trapping methods were common among rural populations, though how often fugitives successfully use them in deep winter remains debated, especially given the scarcity of materials and time. You open your eyes again, staring into the dim space before you, imagining those paths, those quiet routes that animals still follow beneath the snow, driven by instinct and necessity. You noticed tracks earlier. That matters. Your body shifts forward slightly, testing your strength, measuring what remains of your energy reserves, and the answer is not encouraging, but it is not hopeless either. Not yet. You begin to move slowly, easing yourself out of the shelter with deliberate care, preserving its structure in case you need to return quickly. The cold greets you immediately, sharper than before, as if it has been waiting for your return, and your breath catches for just a moment before you force it steady again. No sudden movements. You step lightly across the snow, following the faint memory of the tracks you saw earlier, your eyes adjusting to the darkness, picking out subtle variations in the surface, small depressions where something passed not long ago. The forest is quieter now. Even the wind has stilled, leaving a heavy silence that feels almost watchful, as though the land itself is aware of your presence. You pause, often listening, letting your ears stretch outward into the night, searching for any sign of movement that is not your own. Nothing answers. You continue. The tracks appear again, faint but visible, partially filled with new snow, yet still distinct enough to follow if you are careful. Likely a hare, small but enough. You crouch, studying them more closely, noting the spacing, the direction, the way they curve toward a denser patch of undergrowth ahead. Animals conserve energy too. They take efficient paths. You rise slowly and follow each step placed with intention, minimizing sound, minimizing effort as much as possible in a world that resists both. The smell changes slightly as you move, the sharp pine giving way to something earthier, damp beneath the frozen surface, a subtle hint that life continues here, hidden, just out of sight. You feel it more than see it. A quiet presence. Your hands tighten slightly within your cloak, fingers brushing against the small length of cord you carry, worn and frayed, but still usable. It will have to be enough. You reach the edge of the undergrowth and pause, scanning the area, noting small gaps between branches, narrow passages that an animal might pass through repeatedly. This is where you try. You kneel, working carefully, setting the snare with slow, deliberate movement, shaping the loop, anchoring it to a nearby branch, adjusting its height just above the snow's surface. Precision matters. Too high and it misses, too low and it fails. You finish and sit back, slightly examining your work in the dim light, knowing that success is far from guaranteed, yet also knowing that doing nothing guarantees failure. A simple truth. You set a second snare nearby, then a third, spacing them along the faint path, each one a quiet hope placed into the night. The effort leaves you slightly breathless, your body reminding you again of its limits, and you pause, resting on your heels for a moment longer than you intend. Fatigue creeps in quickly. You cannot stay here. You rise again, slower this time, and retrace your steps back toward the shelter, careful not to disturb the area too much, preserving the illusion of safety for whatever might pass through later. The forest feels colder now, if that is even possible, the air sharper, the silence deeper, pressing in around you as you move. Your shelter appears again, barely visible until you are almost upon it. A low shape beneath snow-laden branches, easily missed, unless you know exactly where to look. That is good. Very good. You slip back inside, pulling yourself into the narrow space, adjusting your position until the structure settles once more around you. The warmth you left behind is gone, replaced by the same steady chill. But you carry something else with you now. A plan, a small chance. You curl inward again, conserving heat, listening as your breathing slows once more, and somewhere beyond the trees, far off and indistinct, the forest continues its quiet, patient rhythm. You wait. That is all you can do now. Wait and hope that the night gives something back. You settle back into the narrow shelter, the branches above you holding firm, and for a while you simply listen, letting the quiet stretch out around you like a heavy blanket that never quite warms. Waiting becomes its own kind of work. Your body remains still, but your mind moves, circling the paths you walked, the snares you set, the faint impressions left behind in the snow that now carry more importance than anything else in this frozen world. Tracks tell stories. You just have to read them. The thought lingers as you shift slightly, adjusting your cloak to seal in what little warmth you have managed to gather, and your fingers brush against the rough stitching again, those mismatched patches reminding you how survival is often nothing more than a collection of imperfect solutions held together long enough to matter. Outside, the forest breathes quietly, and though you cannot see it clearly, you can feel its subtle changes, the way the air moves differently between the trees, the way the silence thickens or thins depending on what passes through it. You begin to understand something important. Movement leaves trees. Medieval hunters knew this well, and so did those who wished to avoid them, reading not only animal tracks but also human signs, broken twigs, compressed snow disturbances that might seem insignificant to an untrained eye. Historians generally agree that tracking skills were essential in medieval woodland life, yet they still debate how many outlaws possessed such refined knowledge, or whether many simply learned through necessity, trial, and frequent failure. You exhale slowly, watching the faint mist form and disappear, and your thoughts drift back to the tracks you followed earlier, the small, careful pattern that led you through the trees. They were easy enough to notice then, but by morning they may be gone, softened, or erased entirely by fresh snowfall or shifting wind. Nothing lasts here, not for long. You close your eyes briefly, picturing the terrain in your mind, fixing the route as best you can, because memory may soon be all you have. A soft sound reaches you. You open your eyes immediately. It is faint, barely more than a whisper against the snow, but it is different from the natural settling of branches or distant creaks of frozen wood. This is movement, close. You remain perfectly still, your breathing shallow, your body pressed low against the uneven bed of branches beneath you. The sound comes again, a light crunch, followed by a pause, then another, as if something is testing each step, carefully aware of the silence it moves through. Not large, but cautious. You wait. Seconds stretch longer than they should, your senses sharpening, reaching outward into the darkness beyond your shelter. The sound shifts slightly to your left, then stops completely, leaving only the echo of your own heartbeat filling the space in its absence. You do not move, not yet. Eventually the quiet settles again, and whatever passed continues on its way, leaving no clear answer behind. Perhaps one of your snares has done its work, perhaps not. You cannot know until morning. Patience again. Always begins. You relax just enough to ease the tension from your shoulders, though your body remains alert, ready to respond if the silence breaks once more. In time, your thoughts return to the broader patterns of the forest, the invisible lines that crisscross this landscape. Paths worn by animals, by hunters, and sometimes by those like you moving carefully between survival and capture. You begin to see them differently now, not just as routes, but as risks. Every track you leave is a message, and not just for you. Medieval authorities often relied on trackers when pursuing fugitives, individuals skilled in reading the land, capable of following subtle signs across surprising distances. Some records suggest that even lightly covered footprints could be traced for miles under the right conditions, though historians still argue about how consistently effective such tracking truly was, especially in heavy winter terrain. You shift your foot slightly, feeling the stiff leather of your boot resist the movement, and you think of the marks you left earlier. The path from your shelter to the snare site, the compressed snow that may already be telling your story to anyone who knows how to listen. A quiet unease settles in. You cannot erase them all, but you can be careful. You make a mental note, a quiet promise to yourself to move differently tomorrow, to step where the ground is already disturbed when possible, to avoid open stretches where your trail would be too clear to use natural cover, not just for hiding but for misdirection. Small adjustments, they matter. The forest remains still, yet it no longer feels empty to you. It feels watched. Not by any single presence, but by the accumulation of possibilities, animals, hunters, chance itself, all moving through the same space, crossing paths in ways you may never see until it is too late. You pull your cloak tighter again, tucking your chin down, letting your breath warm the space around your face as you settle deeper into the shelter. The cold presses in once more, steady and persistent, but you have learned to push back, not with strength alone, but with awareness, with attention to the smallest details that might shift the balance in your favour. You listen. The silence returns fully now, unbroken and heavy, and within it you begin to notice something subtle, something almost comforting, the rhythm of the forest at rest, a slow, steady stillness that for now includes you. You are part of it, whether you belong or not. Your eyes grow heavier again, drawn downward by exhaustion that you can no longer fully resist, and though sleep remains dangerous, it also becomes unavoidable in small, shallow fragments. You let it come carefully, just enough. The night continues around you, and somewhere beyond the darkness your snares wait quietly set along invisible paths, holding the possibility that by morning the forest may have offered you something in return. You wake slowly, not from comfort, but from the faint shift in light, filtering through the branches above you, a dull grey that signals morning has arrived without warmth. The cold remains steady and unchanged, as if the night never truly ended, only softened at the edges by a reluctant dawn. Your body feels heavy, stiff. You stretch slightly, careful not to disturb the shelter, and a quiet ache spreads through your limbs, a reminder of how little rest you truly gained. Still you made it through. That matters. You draw a slow breath, the air sharp but less biting than before, and for a moment you remain still, listening for any sign that the forest has changed. Morning carries different sounds, subtle ones, a distant rustle, a faint shift of wings somewhere above, life returning in small, cautious movements. You ease yourself forward, pushing aside the branches just enough to look out, and the world reveals itself again pale and quiet beneath a thin wash of light. Snow stretches in every direction, marked now by faint shadows and gentle contours that were hidden in the darkness. It feels almost peaceful. Almost. You slide out of the shelter, your boots pressing into the snow with that same muted crunch, and immediately you notice the difference in the surface. Your tracks from the night remain, though softened slightly, their edges less defined but still visible enough to follow. They lead away from your shelter, a clear line pointing toward where you set your snares. A problem. You study them for a moment, noting how they catch the light, how they guide the eye forward, and you realize how easily someone else could do the same. You shift your path slightly as you begin to move, stepping alongside your previous trail rather than directly on it, testing how the snow responds, how much you can alter the pattern without drawing more attention. It is not perfect, but it is something. You move slowly, your senses adjusting to the daylight, picking out details more clearly. Now, small disturbances in the snow, faint impressions left by passing creatures, subtle changes in texture that reveal where the surface has been broken. The forest speaks more openly in daylight. You just have to listen. Medieval trackers were known for their ability to interpret such signs, distinguishing between fresh and old tracks, identifying species' direction, even the pace of movement. Historians generally accept that this knowledge was highly developed among hunters and scouts, though they continue to debate how consistently it was applied in pursuit of outlaws, especially in dense woodland, where trails could easily overlap and confuse. You crouch, briefly examining a set of marks that cross your path smaller than yours, spaced in a pattern you recognize. The hare again. Or one like it. The impressions are fresher now, edges still crisp, suggesting movement during the night. Your snares may have caught something, or missed entirely. You rise and continue your pace, steady but cautious, aware that daylight, while helpful, also exposes you more clearly. The trees offer some cover, their trunks breaking the open space, but beyond them the forest thins slightly, revealing a gentle slope that leads downward. At its base you catch sight of something that makes you pause, a river, frozen. It stretches across the landscape like a pale ribbon, its surface uneven, marked by subtle ridges and darker patches where the ice may be thinner. You remain still, studying it from a distance. Frozen rivers were both pathways and hazards in the medieval world, used by travellers when snow made roads impassable yet feared for their unpredictability. Some sections could support weight easily, while others concealed weak spots beneath a deceptive surface. Historians still argue about how often such crossings resulted in accidents, as records tend to focus more on outcomes than frequency. You take a step closer, then another. The idea forms quickly, almost instinctively. A frozen river could hide your tracks. It could carry you farther faster, leaving little trace behind. But it could also end everything in a single misstep. A risk. Always a risk. You shift your weight slightly, testing the ground beneath your feet, feeling the firmness of the packed snow as you consider your options. The snares come first. Food matters more than distance. You turn away from the river for now, letting it remain in your awareness, a possibility to return to later, and continue toward the undergrowth where you set your traps. The air feels different here, slightly warmer, or perhaps just less exposed, the trees closer together, the ground more sheltered from the wind. You slow your steps as you approach, careful not to disturb the area too quickly, your eyes scanning for any sign of change. There, a movement, subtle but unmistakable. One of the snares has tightened. You move closer, your breath held your attention, narrowing, and as you reach the first loop you see it clearly. A small hare caught, still now. You pause, not from hesitation but from recognition. This is what you needed, what you hoped for. The forest has given something back. You kneel slowly, your movements respectful, efficient, doing what must be done without wasting time or energy. The task is quiet, focused, necessary. When it is finished, you loosen the snare and gather what you can, your hands working quickly to preserve warmth and momentum. There is no room for delay. You check the other snares. Empty. That is fine. One is enough for now. You rise again, the weight of your find small but significant, and your thoughts shift immediately to what comes next. Fire, preparation, caution, always caution. You glance once more toward the frozen river in the distance, its pale surface catching the weak morning light, and you feel the quiet pull of it again, the promise of movement, of escape, of something beyond this small immediate struggle. But not yet. First you survive the day. Then perhaps you choose the path. You carry the hare close to your body, both to keep it from freezing harder and to hide its outline against your cloak, and as you retrace your steps through the trees, the quiet satisfaction of success settles in, slowly tempered by the awareness that one good catch does not guarantee another. Food is never certain, not here. The forest feels slightly different now, as if your awareness has sharpened along with your purpose, each sound more distinct, each movement more deliberate as you navigate back toward your shelter. The tracks you left earlier remain visible, though softened by the faint drift of snow, and you follow them with care, adjusting your steps where you can, minimizing disturbance, shaping your path with more intention than before. Small changes matter. You begin to notice how the light filters through the branches, pale and thin, offering just enough visibility to guide you without fully revealing the landscape, and it creates a strange balance, one where you can see but not too far, where the world feels both open and hidden at the same time. It suits you. You approach the shelter, slowly scanning the area before stepping too close, checking for signs of disturbance, anything that might suggest you have been followed or discovered. Nothing stands out. The branches remain as you left them, the snow undisturbed except for your own earlier marks. Good. You slip back inside, pulling the hare with you, and the confined space closes around you once more. Familiar now in its tightness, its quiet protection from the wind that still moves beyond the thin walls of branches and snow. The air inside feels slightly warmer than outside, though, only by a narrow margin, and you settle into position, placing the hare carefully beside you as you consider your next steps. Food must be prepared. But preparation brings risk. Cooking, even in small amounts, produces scent and smoke, both of which can travel farther than you might expect in cold air. Medieval outlaws face this constant dilemma, needing to eat yet needing to remain hidden, and historians generally agree that many relied on small, carefully managed fires, often shielded by terrain or vegetation to reduce visibility. Still, there is ongoing debate about how effectively scent could be concealed, especially in the winter, when the air carries it more sharply across distances. You glance toward the direction of your previous fire, considering whether to return there or create a new one closer to your shelter. A new fire risks fresh signs. The old one may still hold embers, a better option. You reach for the hare again, your fingers brushing against its fur, now stiffening in the cold, and you begin the quiet work of preparing it, your movements efficient, practiced, not from long experience but from necessity. The process is careful, controlled. You waste nothing. The smell begins faintly metallic and earthy, subtle but present, and you remain aware of it, aware of how it might carry if you're not cautious. You finish quickly wrapping what you can within your cloak, preserving it from the open air as much as possible, and then you prepare to move again. Fire waits. You ease yourself out of the shelter once more, your body protesting slightly. The cold returning immediately as you step into the open and you move toward the site of your earlier fire, your pace steady, your senses alert. The forest has shifted again. Daylight has grown stronger, though still weak, and with it comes more movement. Faint signs of life threading quietly through the trees. You hear distant rustling, a bird's brief call, small things, but enough to remind you that you are not alone here. You reach the fire site and pause, scanning the ground, and you notice the shallow pit where you built it, the darkened earth beneath a light dusting of fresh snow. You kneel, brushing it aside carefully, and beneath it you find what you hoped for. Embers, still faintly alive. A small relief. You coax them gently, adding dry tinder, breathing softly to encourage the glow, and slowly, carefully, the fire returns, not in a burst, but in a gradual awakening that mirrors your own persistence. It grows low and controlled just as before, hidden within the shallow pit shielded from view. You position yourself close but not too close, arranging the prepared meat in a way that allows it to cook without producing excessive smoke, turning it slowly, watching the process with focused attention. The smell deepens, richer now. It fills the small space around you, mixing with the scent of wood smoke, and for a moment it feels almost overwhelming after so long without food. Hunger sharpens again. But you wait. Patience. Always patience. Cooking too quickly risks waste, and waste is something you cannot afford. You listen as you work your ears tuned to the forest beyond the small circle of warmth you have created, and every crack of a branch, every shift of snow draws your attention, though most resolve into nothing more than the natural movements of the land. Still, you remain alert. There are stories not always confirmed of outlaws forming loose groups during harsh winters, sharing resources and protection when survival alone became too difficult. Some historians support this idea, pointing to scattered accounts of banded fugitives, while others argue that distrust and scarcity often prevented such cooperation from lasting. You consider this briefly, the idea of others, the warmth it might bring, the danger as well. You turn the meat again, watching as it cooks the surface, changing slowly, the process steady and controlled, and you feel the quiet satisfaction of having secured something tangible, something that will carry you forward at least for a while. The fire crackles softly, the forest listens, and you remain there, balance between need and caution shaping your survival. One careful decision at a time. You eat slowly, though every instinct urges you to do the opposite, and each bite feels heavier with meaning than it should, as if the simple act of chewing carries the weight of the entire night behind you. The warmth of the cooked meat spreads through your mouth and throat, then settles deeper, a quiet, steady presence that begins to push back against the hollow ache that has followed you since yesterday. It is not a feast, not even close, but it is enough, for now. You pause between bites, forcing yourself to slow down to let your body accept the food without shock, because too much too quickly can leave you weaker rather than stronger. Medieval survival was often less about abundance and more about restraint, a careful balance between hunger and preservation that shaped daily life for many, especially those living beyond the protection of settled communities. You finish what you can, setting aside what remains, wrapping it tightly to preserve it for later, and your hands move with a quiet efficiency that feels more natural now, as if repetition is beginning to teach your body what your mind is still catching up to. The fire continues to burn low beside you, its heat steady but limited, and you take a moment to extend your hands toward it again, letting the warmth reach into your fingers, easing the stiffness that still lingers in your joints. You cannot stay long. Smoke rises, always rising. Even controlled, even minimal, it leaves a trace, and the longer you remain, the greater the chance that someone or something might notice. You brush snow lightly over the edges of the fire pit, reducing its visibility further, then begin the careful process of diminishing the flame, not extinguishing it entirely, but bringing it back down to embers that can be revived later if needed. Fire must be managed, not wasted. You rise slowly, your body feeling slightly stronger now though, still far from restored, and you glance once more toward the direction of the frozen river, its pale surface visible through the trees like a silent invitation. Movement offers options, but also exposure. You turn away from it again, at least for now, and instead shift your attention toward the distant edge of the forest where the land begins to thin and the possibility of human presence grows more likely. Others, all, scattered, but there you know they exist. Medieval records describe countless rural settlements often isolated and self-sufficient, relying on nearby woodlands for fuel, food, and protection. For someone like you, they represent both opportunity and danger, places where supplies might be taken, but where discovery could lead to immediate capture or worse. Historians generally agree that outlaws occasionally approached such settlements under cover of darkness, scavenging what they could, though the frequency and success of these attempts remain uncertain, shaped as much by chance as by skill. You consider it carefully. Not today. Daylight makes such risks too great, and your current position, hidden and relatively secure, offers more than you had before. You choose caution for now. You gather your remaining food and secure it within your cloak, ensuring it is protected from the cold air, then begin to move again, circling back toward your shelter with a wider path. This time intentionally altering your route to avoid creating a clear, repeated trail. Your steps are slower now, more deliberate, each one placed with thought, and you begin to notice how the snow responds differently in various areas, how some patches compress easily while others resist, how shadows reveal depth and texture in ways that can either conceal or expose your movement. The forest teaches quietly. You just have to pay attention. As you walk, the air shifts slightly, carrying with it a faint scent that does not belong entirely to the natural world around you. Smoke, not yours. You stop immediately, still listening. The scent is distant, barely there, but distinct enough to recognize, and your mind begins to trace its direction. Its source. Somewhere beyond the trees. Perhaps near the edge of the forest, perhaps closer than you would prefer. You remain motionless, your breath controlled your senses, stretching outward, searching for any accompanying sound, voices, movement, anything that might confirm what the scent suggests. Nothing follows, only the faint trace of smoke lingering in the cold air before slowly dissipating. A nearby camp, or a hearth, or something else entirely. You do not move toward it, not now. Knowledge is useful, but distance is safer. You adjust your path, slightly angling away from the source, increasing the space between you and whatever lies in that direction, and as you continue, the forest gradually returns to its familiar rhythm, the subtle sounds and scents settling back into place as if nothing has changed. But something has. You are more aware now, more cautious. The shelter comes into view again, its low shape blending into the surrounding snow and branches nearly invisible until you are close enough to recognize its outline. You pause before entering, scanning the area once more, ensuring that nothing has disturbed it in your absence. It remains untouched. Good. You slip back inside the confined space closing around you, and you settle once more into the position you have come to know your body, adjusting quickly, conserving heat, preserving energy. The day stretches ahead, long, cold, uncertain. But you have food, you have shelter, and for now that is enough to continue. You settle deeper into the shelter, the narrow space shaping itself around your body, as if it has begun to remember you, and for a while you remain still, letting the faint warmth from your earlier fire and meal linger, just long enough to soften the edge of the cold. The forest outside feels quieter again, though not empty, and you notice how your awareness has changed, how your senses now reach outward, without effort, tracking subtle shifts in sound and scent as naturally as breathing. Smell matters more than you expected. It lingers, it travels. The faint trace of cooked meat still clings to your hands, to your cloak, and you rub your fingers lightly against the fabric, trying to dull it, to blend it back into the surrounding scents of pine and damp wood. Medieval hunters often relied on scent as much as sight, using it to locate animals or avoid detection themselves, and while historians generally agree that human scent can carry surprisingly far in cold air, they continue to debate how consistently it could be used to track individuals across varied terrain. You inhale slowly, testing the air within your shelter, and you begin to notice its layers more clearly, the sharp resin of broken branches, the faint earthiness beneath the snow, the subtle trace of smoke drifting from the direction of your hidden fire pit. It is a delicate balance. Too much scent and you reveal yourself. Too little and you risk losing awareness of what moves around you. You shift slightly, adjusting your position to minimize contact with the cold ground, and your cloak rustles, softly releasing another faint wave of smell into the enclosed space. Sweat, smoke, animal, all mixed together, now forming something distinctly yours, something that marks your presence whether you intend it to or not. You pause considering this. Animals notice such things, so do people. There are scattered accounts suggesting that some outlaws attempted to mask their scent by rubbing themselves with the crushed leaves, pine needles, or even soil, blending their odour with the environment. Whether these methods were truly effective remains uncertain, as written records rarely provide enough detail to confirm their success, leaving historians to speculate based on broader knowledge of medieval practices. You reach down, gathering a small handful of pine needles from the shelter floor, and crush them gently between your fingers, releasing their sharp, clean aroma. It fills the air immediately stronger than before, and you rub it lightly along your sleeve, your hands letting the scent spread and settle. It is a simple act, but it feels purposeful. You listen again. The forest answers with a soft, steady quiet, broken only by distant, indistinct sounds that blend into the background, neither threatening nor reassuring, simply present. Time passes slowly here. You begin to notice the way light shifts across the snow, outside subtle changes that mark the movement of the sun, though its warmth never truly reaches you. The day remains cold, unforgiving. You consider moving again, perhaps exploring farther, perhaps checking the snares once more, but something holds you in place, a quiet understanding that constant movement is not always the best choice. Energy must be preserved carefully. You remain where you are, conserving strength, letting your body recover as much as it can, and your thoughts drift once more to the scent you noticed earlier, the distant smoke that hinted at others nearby. It lingers in your mind, not as a temptation, but as a warning. You shift your head slightly, pressing it against the rough bark above you, and the texture grounds you, reminding you of the physical world, the immediate reality that surrounds you. Survival is not abstract. It is here, now, in each breath, each decision, each moment of awareness. A faint breeze passes through the trees, carrying with it a new mixture of scents, subtle and layered, and you catch something unfamiliar beneath it, something faint but distinct enough to notice. Leather, possibly, or something close to it. You freeze, listening. The scent fades, quickly replaced again by the more familiar notes of the forest, but the impression remains lingering, just long enough to unsettle you. Someone passed through, or is passing through. You remain perfectly still, your breathing slow, your body pressed low within the shelter, and you allow the silence to settle once more before considering your next move. You do not rush, you do not panic, but you do not ignore it either. Medieval forests were rarely empty, even in winter, and while large groups were uncommon, individuals, hunters, travellers, even other fugitives could move through these spaces with surprising quiet. Historians still debate how frequently such encounters occurred, as records often focus on outcomes rather than the countless moments of near contact that likely went unnoticed. You wait longer than feels necessary, then longer still. Nothing follows, no sound, no further scent. The forest returns to its steady rhythm, as if the disturbance never happened at all. You exhale, slowly easing the tension from your shoulders, though you remain alert. Your awareness sharpened now, in a way that will not fade quickly. You understand something new. You're not just surviving the cold, you're navigating presence, seen and unseen, known and unknown. You adjust your cloak once more, pulling it tighter around you, and settle back into stillness, letting your senses remain open. Your body conserving energy, your mind quietly tracking every subtle change in the world beyond your shelter. The day continues, and you remain within it, careful, aware, and still unseen. You remain still for a long time after the faint scent fades your body. Quiet but alert, as if the forest itself has pressed a gentle hand against your chest and asked you to listen more closely than before. time stretches, slowly. The light shifts again, barely noticeable, yet enough to signal that the day is moving forward, carrying you with it whether you act or not. You adjust your position slightly, careful not to disturb the shelter, and your joints protest with a dull stiffness that reminds you how little you have moved since returning. Movement is necessary, but so is caution. You decide to step out again, not far, just enough to test the air beyond your small refuge to confirm what your senses hinted at earlier. You ease forward, pushing aside the branches with slow precision, and the cold greets you once more, sharper than it felt inside, though now it feels almost familiar, something you have begun to understand rather than simply endure. The forest stands quiet around you, its pale daylight unchanged, its silence steady, yet beneath it there is a subtle difference. Something just out of place, something you cannot immediately define. You step lightly onto the snow, your boots pressing down with care, and you pause, listening, letting your awareness stretch outward into the space between the trees. Then you hear it, faint, distant, a sound that does not belong entirely to wind or wood, a rhythm, irregular. Footsteps, perhaps, though softened by distance and snow. You lower yourself slightly, your posture instinctively shifting, reducing your profile, making yourself less visible against the uneven terrain. You remain still, your breathing controlled, your ears focused on the direction of the sound. It comes again, then fades, then returns slightly altered, as if whoever or whatever is moving has changed direction. Not close, but not impossibly far either. You consider your options, carefully weighing each possibility against the risks you now understand more clearly. To move toward the sound would be reckless, to ignore it entirely would be unwise. You choose something in between. You shift your position slightly, moving behind a thicker tree trunk, using its shape to shield your outline while maintaining a line of sight through the gaps between branches. You watch, you wait. The forest offers no immediate answers, only the quiet continuation of that distant movement, now fading again into something indistinct. It could be a hunter, a traveller, another outlaw, or something else entirely. Medieval records describe patrols sent into woodland areas to track and capture fugitives, though historians continue to debate how organised and frequent these efforts were, especially in harsher winter conditions when movement was more difficult for everyone involved. You remain there for a while longer, letting the sound fade completely before allowing yourself to move again slowly, carefully returning to the shelter with a heightened sense of awareness that now colours every step you take. The space beneath the branches feels different when you re-enter, not less safe, but more temporary, as if you now see it not just as protection, but as something that could be discovered if you remain too long. Nothing here lasts. You settle back into place, your body adjusting quickly, but your mind remains active, turning over what you heard, what you sensed, what it might mean for the hours ahead. Night will come again, and with it more uncertainty. You listen as the forest begins to shift once more, the subtle transition from day toward evening, already beginning, though the change is slow, almost imperceptible at first. The light dims slightly, the shadows lengthen, and with them the sounds change as well. A faint call echoes somewhere distant, not quite a howl, not quite a cry, something in between that lingers just long enough to unsettle before fading back into silence. You feel it in your chest, not fear exactly, but awareness. You pull your cloak tighter, tucking your hands beneath it again, preserving warmth as the temperature begins its gradual descent once more. The cycle continues, day to night, movement to stillness, sound to silence. You begin to understand how important it is to anticipate these shifts, to prepare before they fully arrive, because once they do, your options narrow quickly. You consider your fire, your food, your shelter, each one a piece of a fragile system that must be maintained if you're to continue. Nothing can be neglected, not even for a moment. The forest grows quieter as the light fades further, and you notice how the air feels heavier, now the cold settling in and again with a familiar persistence. You adjust your position once more, curling inward, conserving heat, preparing for another long stretch of darkness that will test your endurance in ways that are becoming increasingly familiar. Outside, the world dims. Inside, you remain still, listening, waiting, surviving one moment at a time as the night approaches once more. You feel the night returning before it fully arrives, a gradual tightening in the air that settles into your bones long before the light disappears completely, and you shift within the shelter, preparing yourself for the long stretch ahead with a quiet, practiced focus. Your hands move slowly, almost automatically now, checking what little you have, adjusting the placement of your remaining food, ensuring it stays protected from both cold and unwanted attention. Small tasks matter. They anchor you. The forest outside dims further, the pale grey of late day, fading into deeper shades that blur the edges of everything, and you notice how quickly visibility drops once the sun retreats, how the familiar shapes of trees and snow begin to merge into something less defined, more uncertain. Darkness changes the rules. You lean slightly forward, listening, letting your senses adjust as they have before, stretching outward into the quiet, searching for any sign that the movement you heard earlier has drawn closer. Nothing answers. Only the steady, low hush of wind moving through branches, carrying with it the dry scent of snow and wood and something faintly metallic that seems to cling to the cold itself. You exhale slowly, watching your breath drift and vanish, and your thoughts turn to what you can still control. Tools, even the simplest ones. Medieval outlaws rarely carried much, but what they did have often made the difference between survival and failure. A small knife, if you are fortunate enough to possess one, becomes invaluable, used for cutting, shaping, preparing and defending. Others relied on sharpened sticks, crude but effective in the right hands, fashioned from available wood and hardened by fire. Historians generally agree that such improvised tools were common among those living beyond structured society, though they continue to debate how frequently these items were carried versus created on the spot as needed. You reach for a branch within the shelter, one of the thicker pieces you gathered earlier, and test its weight, its flexibility, its potential. It is not perfect, but it will do. You begin to shape it, working slowly, carefully, using what edge you have available, scraping and smoothing, forming a rough point that could serve multiple purposes. The process is quiet, focused. Each movement deliberate, each adjustment small but meaningful. You do not rush. Rushing leads to mistakes. And mistakes here are costly. The wood resists at first its frozen surface, harder than it would be in warmer conditions, but with patience it yields, gradually taking the shape you guide it toward. A simple tool, but yours. You pause, occasionally flexing your fingers, warming them against your cloak before continuing, aware of how quickly dexterity fades in the cold. The shelter holds its warmth just enough to allow this work, just enough to keep your hands moving, and you use that time carefully shaping not just the branch, but your understanding of what you need to survive. When you finish, you hold it up briefly, examining the point, testing its strength, then set it aside within easy reach. It is not a weapon in the way others might think of one, but it is something, and something matters. You lean back again, letting your body rest, and your attention shifts outward once more, returning to the sounds of the forest as night settles fully into place. They are different now, deeper, more spaced out, yet somehow more significant. One standing out against the heavier silence. A distant crack, a soft shift, then stillness again. You listen, always listening. There are scattered accounts suggesting that some outlaws crafted more complex tools, traps, even simple weapons from scavenged materials. Though historians remain uncertain about how widespread such practices were given the limited documentation and the transient nature of their lives. You consider this briefly, the idea of building more, doing more, but you also recognize the limits of your current situation, the need to balance effort with conservation action with restraint. The cold deepens. You feel it more clearly now, pressing against the edges of your shelter, seeping through the layers of branches and snow, testing the boundaries you have created. You adjust your cloak again, pulling it tighter, tucking your hands beneath it, drawing your knees closer, conserving heat in the only ways available to you. The position is familiar now, necessary. Outside, the darkness is complete, the forest reduced to sound and scent to the faintest impressions of movement that you can no longer see but must still account for. You close your eyes briefly, not to sleep, but to focus, to let your other senses take precedence, to listen more deeply than sight allows. A faint sound reaches you, soft, irregular, close enough to notice. You open your eyes immediately, your body tensing, your awareness sharpening, as you try to place it to understand what moves beyond your shelter. It comes again, a light crunch, followed by a pause, then another slower, this time more deliberate. You remain still, completely still. The sound lingers at the edge of your awareness, then shifts slightly, circling as if whatever moves is uncertain, exploring, testing the space around it. You wait. Time stretches again. Your breathing slow, controlled, your body pressed low against the ground, and for a moment you feel the fragile boundary between you and the outside world more clearly than ever before. Then, as quietly as it came, the sound fades, moving away, dissolving back into the greater silence of the forest. You do not move, not yet. You remain where you are, letting the quiet return fully, letting your body release the tension slowly, carefully, until the moment passes and the night settles once more into its steady, watchful stillness. You exhale, softly, and prepare to endure what remains. You remain still long after the sound disappears, your body held in that quiet tension that lingers even when the danger has passed, and only gradually do you allow yourself to relax, easing your shoulders, letting your breath deepen again without breaking the careful rhythm you've maintained through the night. The shelter feels smaller now, not physically, but in the way your awareness has expanded beyond it, stretching into the forest, tracing every faint disturbance, every subtle shift that might matter. You understand more than before, and that understanding brings a different kind of weight. Fatigue settles in slowly, heavier than the night before, pressing behind your eyes, along your limbs, making each small adjustment feel more deliberate, more costly. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the structure, and your hand brushes against your side where your remaining food rests, a quiet reassurance that you have something left, though not enough, to ignore the steady pull of hunger that continues beneath everything else. You close your eyes for a moment, just a moment. Your body leans towards sleep, drawn by exhaustion, by the need to recover, but you resist sinking too deeply, keeping yourself in that narrow space between rest and awareness where you can still respond if needed. Sleep here is never complete. The cold does not allow it. The forest does not allow it. You hover, somewhere between. Time becomes uncertain in this state, stretching and folding in ways that make it difficult to measure. And when you open your eyes again, the darkness remains unchanged, the night still holding its place around you with quiet persistence. Your body feels colder now. The warmth you gathered earlier has faded, replaced by a deeper chill that has settled into your core, making your movements slower, your thoughts slightly heavier. You pull your cloak tighter, adjusting it carefully, sealing what little heat remains, and you bring your hands closer to your chest, feeling the faint tremor that runs through your fingers. Not strong, but there. Your breath remains steady, though you notice how it feels different now, slightly shallower, as if your body is conserving energy even in the act of breathing. You recognize the signs, not fully, but enough. Exposure to cold, prolonged and unrelenting, begins to affect more than just comfort and medieval people. Though lacking modern understanding, were well aware of its dangers, often describing the gradual weakening that came with extended time in freezing conditions. Historians generally agree that hypothermia was a common risk in such environments, though the exact ways it was experienced and interpreted varied widely depending on the source. You shift again, forcing movement into your limbs. Small motions controlled enough to keep your body engaged without wasting energy. Movement preserves warmth. Stillness preserves energy. You must balance both. A difficult balance. You reach for the branch you shaped earlier, your fingers wrapping around it, feeling its rough surface, its simple form. And for a moment, the act of holding it gives you something to focus on, something tangible that anchors you in the present. You adjust your position slightly, using the branch to press gently against the ground, testing its strength, its usefulness, and you imagine how it might serve you if needed. Not just as a tool, but as an extension of your reach, your awareness. The forest remains quiet, but not empty. You listen again, your senses stretching outward, and you begin to notice something subtle, something that was not as clear before the absence of certain sounds. The way some natural noises have faded, leaving a deeper, more complete silence in their place. It feels different, heavier, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. You wait. A faint wind passes through the trees, carrying with it a sharper edge of cold, and you feel it seep through the shelter, finding the smallest gaps, testing the limits of what you have built. You adjust again, pulling the branches closer, reinforcing the edges, packing a bit more snow where you can reach it, sealing the space more tightly. It helps. Slightly, but enough. There are scattered references in medieval texts to individuals falling ill during harsh winters, not from wounds or violence, but from the slow, quiet effects of cold and exhaustion conditions that were often poorly understood and difficult to treat. Historians continue to debate how these experiences were described and interpreted, as language from the time does not always align clearly with modern medical understanding. You feel it now, not illness exactly, but strain. Your body is working harder than it should, using energy faster than you can replace it, and you recognize the need to manage that carefully if you are to continue. You shift your focus inward, paying attention to your breathing, your posture, the way your body holds itself within the shelter, making small adjustments that might conserve even a little more warmth, even a little more strength. Every detail matters. Outside, the night continues its slow passage, though you cannot yet see the change, and you remain within your narrow space, balancing rest and awareness, warmth and cold survival, and the quiet threat that lingers just beyond the edges of your shelter. You endure. That is what this is, endurance. And for now, it is enough. You notice the shift before you fully understand it, a subtle change not in sound or light, but in the way your thoughts move slower now, softer at the edges, as if the cold has begun to quiet even your mind. It is not unpleasant, just different. You remain curled within the shelter, your cloak wrapped tightly around you, your breath steady but shallow, and for a moment you allow yourself to drift not into sleep, but into something quieter, something that sits just beneath it. The forest holds you there, still, watching. You become aware of the small object at your wrist again, the charm you touched before, and your fingers move toward it almost without thought, tracing its worn edges, its familiar shape, grounding yourself in something that feels older than this moment, older than the cold pressing in around you. It is a small thing, but it matters. Medieval people often carried such objects, tokens of belief or protection, small pieces of faith that connected them to something beyond the immediate dangers of the world. Some were religious, tied to saints or sacred symbols, while others were older, rooted in local traditions and quiet superstitions passed down through generations. Historians generally agree that belief in protective charms was widespread, though they continue to debate how these beliefs were understood, whether as literal protection or as a form of psychological comfort in uncertain times. You turn the charm slowly between your fingers, feeling its texture, its weight, and for a moment the cold seems less sharp, less immediate, as if your focus has shifted just enough to soften its edge. You whisper something under your breath, not loud, not even fully formed, just a sound, a habit perhaps, or something more. The forest does not answer, but it does not interrupt either. The silence remains steady, almost patient, and you find yourself listening to it in a different way now, not just for danger, but for rhythm, for the quiet patterns that repeat beneath everything else. A distant creak, a faint shift, then stillness again. It becomes almost soothing. You adjust your position slightly, your body responding with a dull ache that reminds you how long you have been here, how much it has endured, and you bring your hands closer to your chest again, preserving what little warmth you can. The cold is still there, always there, but you are beginning to understand it, to move with it rather than against it, to anticipate its patterns, its changes. There are stories passed quietly through time of outlaws and wanderers who relied not only on skill but on belief, trusting in signs, omens, small rituals that gave them a sense of control in a world that offered very little. Some historians view these accounts as exaggerated or symbolic, while others suggest they reflect genuine practices shaped by necessity and isolation. You consider this not as a question of truth, but as a reflection of what it means to endure, to find stability in whatever form it takes, whether through knowledge, habit, or something less tangible. Your breathing slows further. The tension in your body eases just slightly enough to allow a deeper kind of rest to settle in, though not fully, never fully, because some part of you remains alert, listening, aware of the fragile boundary between safety and exposure. The night continues. You feel it passing through, you cannot yet see the change, and you remain within your small shelter, your thoughts quieter. Now, your awareness steady but less strained. A soft sound reaches you, different this time, not movement, not wind, something lighter. You listen more closely, and after a moment you recognize it, the faint, intermittent fall of snow from the branches above small clusters, loosening and dropping with a gentle hush that barely disturbs the surface below. It is almost peaceful. You allow yourself to focus on it, to let the rhythm of those soft falls guide your breathing slow and even, matching the quiet pattern of the forest itself. In moments like this, the danger feels distant, not gone, but softened, held at the edges of your awareness rather than pressing directly against it. You rest, not fully asleep, but close enough. The charm remains in your hand, your fingers loosely wrapped around it, and the forest continues its quiet watch as the long night begins slowly, almost imperceptibly, to move toward its end. You sense the storm before it arrives, not through sight at first, but through a subtle pressure in the air, a heaviness that settles over the forest like a held breath waiting to be released. The quiet changes. It thickens. You open your eyes though the darkness remains, and you listen more closely, your awareness sharpening as the first faint signs begin to gather beyond your shelter. The wind returns, soft at first, then building. It threads through the trees with a low rising whisper that carries a different kind of cold one that feels sharper, more restless, as if it is searching for every gap, every weakness in your fragile protection. You shift immediately, your body responding with a sense of urgency that cuts through the lingering fatigue, and your hands move to reinforce the edges of your shelter, pressing snow more firmly against the branches, tightening what you can before the storm fully reaches you. It will not wait. Snow begins to fall, light at first, barely noticeable, then more steadily, each small flake catching what little light remains, drifting downward in a quiet, endless pattern that quickly begins to change the surface around you. You watch it for a moment, the way it gathers, the way it softens edges and erases detail, and you understand what is coming. A blizzard. You move quickly now, but not carelessly, your actions deliberate, focused, guided by what you have already learned. You pull more branches inward, narrowing the opening of your shelter, reducing exposure to the wind that is beginning to push harder through the trees. Snow is both threat and shield. You use it, packing it along the outer edges, building up the barrier, letting it form a thicker wall that can block the wind more effectively. Medieval people familiar with harsh winters often relied on such techniques, using snow itself as insulation, though historians still debate how widely these methods were understood outside of regions where extreme cold was more common. The wind strengthens. It carries the snow sideways, now driving it against your shelter with a steady force that you can feel through the branches, a soft but persistent pressure that tests the structure you have built. You brace yourself inside, adjusting your position, making yourself smaller, more compact, reducing the space the wind can reach. The temperature drops further. You feel it immediately, a sharper bite that seeps through even your layered clothing, and you pull your cloak tighter, tucking it more securely around your body, sealing in what little warmth remains. Your breath becomes more visible now, thicker clouds forming with each exhale, lingering slightly longer before fading into the cold air. You focus on it, steady, controlled. The storm grows louder, not in a sudden roar, but in a gradual accumulation of sound, the wind, the snow, the shifting branches all blending into a continuous low rhythm that fills the forest, replacing the earlier silence with something more active, more insistent. It surrounds you. You close your eyes briefly, not to shut it out, but to concentrate, to feel the structure of your shelter, the way it holds, the way it responds to the pressure around it. It remains intact. For now, you remain still, conserving energy, allowing the storm to pass around you rather than fighting against it, and you begin to understand why movement during such conditions is so dangerous. Visibility drops quickly, paths disappear, direction becomes uncertain. Historians generally agree that winter storms posed a serious threat to anyone travelling through medieval landscapes, often disorienting even experienced individuals, though accounts vary on how frequently such storms led directly to loss of life. You feel the weight of the snow building above you, a subtle increase in pressure as it accumulates on the branches, reinforcing the shelter, but also adding strain to its structure. You adjust again, shifting slightly to support it where you can, your hands pressing upward gently, ensuring it does not collapse inward under the growing load. Careful, always careful. Time becomes difficult to measure as the storm continues, each moment blending into the next, the steady sound of wind and snow, creating a kind of rhythm that pulls at your awareness, making it harder to track how long you've been here, how long you must remain. You focus on small things, your breathing, the position of your hands, the way your body holds itself within the space. These details anchor you, keeping your mind from drifting too far, from losing the sharp edge of awareness that you need to endure this. There are stories, uncertain but persistent, of individuals who became lost in such storms, wandering in circles, unable to find their way back to shelter, their tracks erased almost as soon as they were made. Some historians question the accuracy of these accounts, while others see them as realistic reflections of the dangers posed by severe winter weather. You do not test it, you remain where you are. The wind continues to push, the snow continues to fall, and your shelter holds its small, fragile form, resisting the larger force that moves around it. You endure. That is all you can do, and for now it is enough. The storm does not end quickly, and you begin to understand that survival here is not about waiting for comfort, but about enduring discomfort long enough for conditions to shift again. The wind presses steadily against your shelter, no longer increasing, but not fading either, as if it has settled into a rhythm that could continue for hours without pause. Snow continues to gather above you, thickening the layer that both protects and threatens, and you remain aware of its weight, adjusting your posture occasionally to prevent any sudden collapse that might trap you beneath it. You listen closely. The sound has changed. It is no longer just wind, but a deeper, more constant hush, the kind that comes when falling snow absorbs everything else, muting the world into something softer yet more isolating. It feels like being sealed away. You shift your hands slightly, rubbing them together beneath your cloak, generating a small amount of warmth through friction, and the sensation is brief but noticeable, a reminder that even the smallest actions can still influence your condition. Small actions matter. You focus on them. Your breathing remains steady, though. You notice how the air feels heavier, now colder, more demanding, and you adjust your pace, slowing it further, conserving energy in every possible way. The shelter creaks faintly above you, not in danger but under strain, the branches flexing slightly as the snow continues to accumulate. You press upward again, gently supporting the structure, redistributing the weight where you can. Careful pressure, nothing sudden. Medieval woodsmen and travellers often understood the importance of managing snow load on temporary shelters, though historians still debate how commonly such knowledge extended to outlaws whose survival often depended on quickly adapting skills rather than formally learning them. You feel that adaptation now, not taught, but learned through necessity. The smell inside your shelter has changed slightly. The pine still present, but now mixed with a damp, compact scent of fresh snow pressing in from all sides, creating a closed, insulated space that holds both warmth and moisture. It is not unpleasant, but it is heavy. You shift your position again, adjusting your legs, encouraging circulation, and a dull ache moves through them as feeling returns more clearly, the slow, uncomfortable reminder that your body is still working, still responding. Outside, the storm continues its steady pattern, and you begin to lose any clear sense of direction, the world beyond your shelter reduced to sound alone, with no visible reference points to guide you. It would be easy to become disoriented now, very easy. There are accounts of medieval travellers using simple methods to maintain orientation during storms, such as marking their path with broken branches, or relying on the direction of wind against their bodies, though historians remain uncertain how effective these methods were in dense forests where visual cues were limited. You remain still instead. Movement now would be a mistake. You conserve what you have, letting the storm pass over you rather than through you, and you begin to notice how your awareness shifts inward, focusing less on the distant environment and more on your immediate condition, your breathing, your warmth, your ability to remain present within this confined space. The rhythm of the storm becomes almost hypnotic, the steady hush and pressure creating a kind of background that your mind begins to accept rather than resist. You do not relax completely, but you adapt. Time stretches again, the boundaries between moments blurring, and you find yourself returning to small repetitive actions, flexing your fingers, adjusting your cloak, pressing gently against the shelter to ensure it holds. These actions keep you anchored. They keep you awake. A faint shift occurs, subtle, almost missed. The wind begins to ease, not suddenly, but gradually, its pressure lessening, its sound softening, though the snow continues to fall lighter, now less driven, settling more gently across the forest. You notice it immediately. Change matters. You remain still for a while longer, confirming that the shift continues, that the storm is truly beginning to pass rather than simply pausing, and only when you are certain do you allow yourself to adjust more fully, stretching slightly within the shelter, testing the space around you. It holds. The weight above has increased, but the structure remains intact, supported now by the very snow that once threatened it, forming a thicker barrier that insulates more effectively than before. Snow protects too. You exhale slowly, feeling the tension ease just enough to allow a deeper breath, and you recognize that you have endured another challenge, one that could have easily overwhelmed you if you had misjudged even a single detail. You remain where you are for now, allowing the storm to finish its passage, conserving your strength and preparing for what comes next, because in this world, survival is never about a single moment. It is about what follows. You wait a little longer after the storm softens, letting the final traces of wind fade into a quiet that feels deeper than before, as if the forest has been reset, its surface smoothed its sounds, dampened beneath a fresh, unbroken layer of snow. When you finally shift, it is slow and deliberate, your body stiff from stillness, your joints reluctant to move after holding the same position for too long. You press gently against the shelter above you, testing it one more time, and the packed snow holds firm, now thicker, more stable, forming a kind of insulated shell that feels almost intentional in its shape. It worked! You ease forward, pushing aside a small opening, and pale light filters in brighter than before, reflected strongly off the newly fallen snow, making the world outside appear sharper, almost blinding for a moment as your eyes adjust. The forest has changed. Completely. The ground is smooth again. Your previous tracks erase the surface, reset into something untouched, as if you had never been there at all. It is both relief and warning. Your movements now will be the only marks. You crawl out carefully, rising slowly to your feet, and the cold greets you again, though it feels different now, less biting, more still, the absence of wind making it easier to bear despite the low temperature. You take a few steps, testing your footing, feeling how the fresh snow compresses beneath you softer than before, yet deeper, requiring more effort with each movement. Energy drains faster like this. You notice immediately. The forest is quieter than you have yet experienced the storm, having absorbed and reset everything, leaving a stillness so complete that even your own movements seem unusually loud in comparison. You pause often, listening. Nothing answers. The world feels empty, but you know better. You move a short distance from your shelter, scanning the area, noting how the branches now carry heavier loads of snow, some bent, lower, others creaking faintly under the added weight, creating new shapes, new patterns that you must learn quickly if you are to navigate safely. Everything has changed. You look toward where your snares have been set, though you already suspect what you'll find, and as you make your way there, your steps slow not from hesitation but from the effort required to push through the deeper snow. It pulls at your legs, steals your strength. You reach the area and stop. The snares are gone, not removed, just buried. The fresh snowfall has covered everything, smoothing over the ground, concealing the loops you set so carefully, leaving no visible trace of their placement. You kneel, brushing away the snow, searching, but the depth makes it difficult, and after a moment you realize that recovering them will take more time and energy than you can spare right now. You sit back slightly, accepting it. Loss happens. Medieval survival, especially in harsh winter conditions, often involves such setbacks where effort could be undone overnight by weather alone, and historians generally agree that resilience rather than consistency defined those who managed to endure. You rise again, turning slowly, taking in the forest as it stands now, new and unfamiliar, despite being the same place, and you begin to feel something else beneath the physical strain. Isolation. It settles quietly, not as fear, but as a widening space between you and everything else, a sense that the world has become larger, quieter, more distant than before. No voices, no movement, just you. You draw your cloak tighter, not just for warmth, but for comfort, grounding yourself into the physical sensation, and you begin to move again, not toward any specific goal, but to keep your body active to prevent the stillness from settling too deeply into your muscles and mind. Movement helps, even without bourse and for purpose. The snow continues to fall lightly, though the storm has passed, small flakes drifting down in a slow, steady pattern that adds to the silence rather than breaking it. You watch them for a moment, the way they catch the light, the way they settle, and you feel a strange calm settle over you as well, a quiet acceptance of the conditions around you. There are accounts suggesting that prolonged isolation in such environments could affect a person's perception, making the silence feel heavier, the world more distant, though historians still debate how these experiences were described, often filtered through limited language and understanding of the time. You feel it now, not overwhelming, but present. You stop again, standing still in the open space between the trees, listening, breathing, letting the moment settle fully around you. And for a brief time, the urgency that has driven you since entering this forest eases, replaced by something quieter, something more reflective. You're still here. That matters. You turn back toward your shelter, your steps slower now, more measured, and as you return, you begin to understand that survival is not only physical, not only about food and warmth, but also about maintaining something within yourself, something steady enough to carry you through the long stretches of silence and cold. You reach the shelter again and pause before entering, taking one last look at the altered forest, the smooth, untouched snow, the quiet stillness that now defines everything around you. Then you lower yourself back inside, pulling the branches close, returning to the narrow space that has become your refuge, your world for as long as you remain here. And once again you settle into stillness, carrying both the weight and the quiet of what surrounds you. You sit within the shelter for a while after returning, letting your breathing slow, letting your body recover from the effort of moving through the deepened snow, and gradually your awareness shifts outward again, returning to the quiet vigilance that now feels almost constant. The forest remains still, too still. It feels different after the storm, not just reset, but sharpened, as if every sound that does occur will carry farther, clearer, more distinct against the softened ground. You listen carefully, nothing moves, yet. You adjust your position slightly, pressing your back against the packed snow wall, feeling its firmness, its cold, its quiet support. And you realize how much more enclosed your shelter has become the storm, having reinforced it into something closer to a small chamber than a simple cover. It holds warmth better now, but it also holds you in. A trade-off. You rest your hands together, rubbing them slowly beneath your cloak, and your thoughts drift back to the faint sounds you heard earlier, before the storm, the distant rhythm that suggested movement, footsteps, presence. You have not forgotten. You cannot afford to. Medieval authorities sometimes sent small patrols into forest during winter, especially when tracking known fugitives, though historians still argue about how organized or persistent these efforts were, given the difficulty of moving through snow-covered terrain. Still, even a single patrol matters. You shift your head slightly, listening again, and at first there is nothing. Only the deep layered silence of the forest after snowfall. Then faintly something breaks it. A sound, distant, but clearer now than before. A crunch, followed by another. You freeze immediately, your body going still without conscious effort. Your breathing slowing to the bare minimum as you focus entirely on the direction of the sound. It comes again, more distinct this time. Not random, not wandering, steady, measured, human. You feel it before you fully accept it, the subtle shift in your awareness, the way your body recognizes the pattern even before your thoughts confirm it. Someone is moving through the forest, not close, but not far enough. You lower yourself further within the shelter, reducing your profile, pulling your cloak tighter around you, and you angle your head slightly to listen more precisely, tracking the direction, the pace, the rhythm of the steps as they continue through the snow. They are slow, careful. Whoever it is understands the terrain. You remain perfectly still, your muscles held in quiet tension, your senses extended as far as they can reach, and you begin to map the movement in your mind, estimating distance, direction, intent. The steps shift slightly, angling, not directly toward you, but not entirely away either. Uncertain, you wait. Time stretches again, each sound separated by long pauses that make it difficult to judge how close the person truly is, and you resist the urge to move to look to confirm visually what you already suspect. Movement reveals, stillness conceals. You choose stillness. The sound grows faint, then stronger again, then faint once more, as if the person is navigating around obstacles, adjusting their path through the trees. You hold your breath for a moment longer than is comfortable, then release it slowly, silently, careful not to disturb even the smallest layer of snow around you. There are accounts suggesting that train trackers could follow individuals across snow even after light snowfall using subtle disturbances, compressed layers beneath the surface patterns that remain invisible to most. Though historians continue to debate how reliable such tracking methods were under varying conditions. You think of your earlier movements, your shelter, your fire, your snares, all the small traces you have left behind. You remain still. The sound passes, gradually, slowly. The rhythm shifts farther away, each step becoming less distinct, more absorbed by the surrounding silence, until finally it fades completely, leaving only the quiet behind. You do not move, not immediately. You wait longer than necessary, letting the absence of sound settle, fully ensuring that what you heard has truly moved on, that it is not circling back, not pausing just beyond your range of perception. Only when you are certain do you allow your body to relax, slightly easing the tension in your shoulders, letting your breath deepen again. Close. Too close. You sit there processing what has just happened. The reality of how narrow the distance was between you and discovery, and you understand something more clearly now than before. You're not alone in this forest, not even in winter. You adjust your cloak again, pulling it tighter, grounding yourself in the familiar sensation, and your thoughts begin to shift toward what this means for your next decisions, your movement, your fire, your presence here. You cannot remain in one place forever, but moving carries its own risks. You sit in that balance, that constant calculation, weighing options that never fully resolve into certainty, only into the next step, the next choice, the next moment of survival. Outside, the forest returns to silence. Inside you remain, still, listening, always listening. You remain still long after the footsteps fade, your body quiet, but your mind moving carefully through what you just experienced, replaying the rhythm, the direction, the distance, as if understanding it more fully might offer some control over what comes next. It does not, but you try anyway. The shelter feels tighter now, not physically, but in the way your awareness presses against its edges, as if the outside world has moved closer without changing shape. You shift slightly, adjusting your legs, and the small movement reminds you how quickly stiffness returns when you remain still too long. You need to move carefully. You ease forward, pushing aside a narrow opening, and look out again into the pale, snow-covered forest, the light now brighter than before, reflecting sharply across the fresh surface, making every shadow stand out with quiet clarity. The world appears empty, but you know better. You step out slowly, your boots sinking into the snow, the depth still greater than before the storm, and you move with measured care, placing each step deliberately, minimizing sound, minimizing disturbance. Though you understand that in this fresh layer, any movement will leave a visible trace. There is no avoiding it, only managing it. You circle slightly away from your shelter, not too far, just enough to assess the surrounding area to confirm what your senses suggested earlier. The tracks appear after a short distance, faint at first, then clearer, human. You crouch, examining them closely, noting the depth, the spacing, the direction, and you feel a quiet confirmation settle in your chest. Someone passed through, here, recently. The impressions are partially softened by the continuing light snowfall, but still distinct enough to follow if you choose. You do not yet. Medieval trackers often studied such signs to determine not only direction, but also the condition of the person they followed, whether they were moving quickly, carrying weight, or adjusting their path frequently. Though historians still debate how consistently such detailed interpretations were possible under varying conditions, you remain crouched for a moment longer, observing, letting the information settle. Then you rise slowly, your attention shifting outward again, scanning the forest beyond the immediate signs. The trees stand unchanged, their branches heavy with snow, their shapes slightly altered by the storm, creating new patterns of light and shadow that you must learn again. Everything is familiar and unfamiliar. You take a step back, then another, moving away from the tracks, returning toward your shelter, though not directly choosing a slightly altered path to avoid reinforcing a clear pattern that might be followed later. Small decisions, they matter. As you move, your thoughts drift briefly to something else, something you have not considered fully until now. The presence of others like you, not hunters, not guards, but individuals surviving in the same hidden ways, navigating the same cold, the same risks, the same uncertain balance between movement and concealment. Women too are among them. Though less frequently recorded, there are accounts of women living as fugitives or outlaws, adapting to the same harsh conditions, often relying on a combination of disguise skill and resourcefulness to endure. Historians generally agree that their experiences are underrepresented in surviving records, leaving much uncertain about how they navigated such environments compared to their male counterparts. You consider this quietly not as a question, but as a recognition that survival here is not bound to a single type of person, but shared among those forced into the margins of society, each adapting in their own way. You return to your shelter and pause before entering, listening once more, ensuring that the silence holds, that nothing has followed you back. It remains still. You slip inside again, settling into the narrow space, your body adjusting quickly, conserving warmth, preserving energy, and your thoughts begin to slow once more, shifting from movement to stillness, from observation to reflection. The forest outside continues its quiet existence, unchanged by your presence, indifferent to your survival, and you begin to understand that this place does not offer safety, only opportunity, and even that is uncertain. You sit with that thought for a moment, letting it settle, then you adjust your cloak again, pulling it tighter, grounding yourself in the familiar rhythm of breath and stillness. The day continues, and you remain within it, unseen but not alone. You remain inside the shelter for a while, letting your breathing settle again into that slow, steady rhythm that has become your quiet anchor. And as the stillness returns, your thoughts begin to shift not outward, this time, but deeper inward. Tracing what you have learnt so far, the forest has already taught you much. Quietly, without instruction, you begin to notice patterns now, small details that repeat themselves in ways you did not recognize before, the way certain trees grow closer together in sheltered areas, the way snow gathers more thickly where wind is blocked, the way the ground subtly changes beneath your feet depending on what lies below. These are not obvious lessons, but they matter. You shift slightly, your back pressing against the packed snow wall, and you close your eyes for a brief moment, recalling the paths you have walked, the places where the air felt warmer, the areas where movement was easier, where the snow was thinner, where branches offered better cover. Memory becomes a tool, just as important as anything you carry. Medieval woodland knowledge was often passed through generations, shared quietly among those who lived close to the land. Hunters, gatherers, woodcutters, individuals who understood the forest not as an obstacle but as a system to be read and navigated. Historians generally agree that such knowledge was highly localized, shaped by specific regions and conditions, though they continue to debate how much of it could be transferred or adapted by those forced into unfamiliar environments. You open your eyes, again looking at the interior of your shelter, the arrangement of branches, the way the snow has packed itself into a solid outer layer, and you begin to see it differently now, not just as something you built, but as something shaped in partnership with the environment itself. The forest provided, you adjusted. Together it works. You reach down, running your fingers lightly along the ground, feeling the texture beneath the thin layer of needles and twigs, and you notice how it differs from the exposed snow outside, how it holds slightly more warmth, how it resists the cold just enough to matter. Small differences, big impact. You shift your position again, testing the space, making minor adjustments, improving what you can without dismantling the structure, and the process feels more natural now, less like guesswork, more like understanding. You are learning, slowly but clearly. Outside, the light has shifted again, though you cannot see it directly from within the shelter. You sense it in the way the brightness changes at the edges, the way the shadows move, subtle indicators that time is passing, that the day is advancing toward its next transition. You consider stepping out again, exploring farther, expanding your knowledge of the area, but you weigh it carefully against the risk of being seen. The presence you detected earlier still fresh in your mind. Movement reveals, stillness protects. You choose stillness for now. There are stories uncertain but persistent of individuals who survived long periods in woodland exile by developing an almost instinctive understanding of their surroundings, reading signs that others would overlook, adapting quickly to changes in weather terrain and resource availability. Some historians view these accounts as romanticized, while others believe they reflect genuine, if rare, levels of environmental awareness developed through necessity. You consider this quietly, not as something distant, but as something you are beginning to experience yourself, the gradual shift from reacting to conditions to anticipating them, to recognizing patterns before they fully emerge. You listen again. The forest remains quiet, though not empty, and you notice how your perception of that quiet has changed, how it no longer feels like absence, but like a complex layered presence, filled with subtle signals that you are learning to interpret. You adjust your cloak once more, pulling it tighter, and your hands rest briefly against the charm at your wrist, a small familiar point of focus that grounds you in the present. You breathe slowly, evenly. The cold remains, but it no longer surprises you in the same way its patterns becoming more predictable, its effects more manageable as you adapt your behavior, your movement, your expectations. You're not comfortable, but you are capable, and that difference matters more than anything else. The day continues its quiet progression, and you remain within your shelter, learning not through instruction, but through observation, through experience, through the steady accumulation of small essential knowledge that shapes your survival one moment at a time. You step outside again when the light begins to soften, not yet fading into evening, but shifting enough to signal that time is moving forward and you cannot remain still forever without consequence. The cold greets you as it always does, steady and immediate, though now it feels almost familiar, something you measure rather than resist. You move slowly, your boots pressing into the snow with that same muted sound, and your attention spreads outward again, scanning the forest with a quiet focus that has grown sharper with each passing hour. The land feels different after the storm. Not just reset, but quieter in a deeper way, as if everything living has retreated slightly, conserving energy, moving less, waiting. You notice tracks again, not human this time, smaller, scattered, crossing each other in faint overlapping lines that tell a different kind of story, one of constant subtle movement beneath the stillness. Animals remain active. They must. Survival does not pause for weather. You crouch slightly, studying the marks, noticing how some are shallow, others deeper, how the spacing changes, how direction shifts and loops back patterns that at first seem random, but begin to reveal something more structured the longer you look. Paths, not fixed, but repeated. Medieval hunters often relied on such observations, learning to predict where animals would move based on terrain, shelter, and available food. Though historians still debate how consistently these patterns could be relied upon, especially in harsh winter conditions where behavior might change. You rise slowly, following one of the clearer paths for a short distance, not with urgency but with curiosity, allowing yourself to observe rather than pursue. And you begin to notice how it leads toward a slightly denser area of trees, where branches hang lower, where the snow appears less disturbed by wind. Shelter attracts life, even here. You pause at the edge of this area, listening, and after a moment you hear it faint but distinct, the soft rustle of movement beneath the branches, something small shifting through the undergrowth, careful, deliberate. You remain still, watching. The movement continues for a few seconds, then stops, as if whatever it is has sensed something, perhaps you, perhaps something else, and the silence returns just as quickly as it broke. You do not approach. Not this time. Observation is enough. You step back slowly, retracing your steps, and as you move, your thoughts begin to shift, not just toward immediate survival, but toward understanding how these patterns can guide you. How animals without intention reveal the structure of the land, showing where it is safer, where it is sheltered, where resources might still exist beneath the frozen surface. They lead without knowing. You return toward your shelter, your pace steady, your awareness still wide, and as you walk, you notice how your own movement begins to mirror what you've observed, more deliberate, more efficient, avoiding unnecessary steps, conserving energy in ways that feel less forced, more natural. You're adapting. The forest teaches quietly, always. There are accounts suggesting that some outlaws became highly skilled in reading animal behavior, using it not only for hunting but also for navigation and concealment, though historians remain uncertain how common this level of knowledge was given the limited and often fragmented nature of surviving records. You consider this as you move not as distant information, but as something you're beginning to understand through direct experience, the way observation becomes knowledge and knowledge becomes survival. You reach your shelter again and pause, scanning the area one more time, ensuring that nothing has changed in your absence, that the quiet remains undisturbed, that the fragile balance you have maintained is still intact. It is. You slip back inside the familiar space closing around you, and you settle once more into your position, your body adjusting quickly, conserving warmth, preserving strength for what lies ahead. The light outside continues to fade gradually, the soft glow diminishing as evening approaches, and you feel the shift again, the subtle transition that signals another long night is coming. You prepare, quietly, carefully. And as the forest begins its slow descent into darkness once more, you remain within your shelter, carrying with you not just the memory of what you have endured, but the growing understanding of how to endure what comes next. You feel the coming night before you see it, the light thinning at the edges of the forest, the air tightening once again as the temperature begins its steady descent, and you shift within your shelter, preparing without urgency but with intention. Each movement is smaller now, more efficient. You adjust your cloak reposition, your legs, tuck your hands closer and settle into the posture that conserves heat with the least effort. It has become familiar, almost instinctive. Outside, the last traces of daylight fade slowly, the snow reflecting what remains, until even that soft glow disappears, leaving the forest in a deeper, more complete darkness than before. The silence returns with it, heavy, patient. You listen as you always do, letting your awareness stretch outward, tracing the space beyond your shelter, noting every faint sound, every shift in the air that might signal movement. Nothing comes at first, only stillness. But stillness does not mean safety. You know that now. You exhale slowly, watching the faint cloud of your breath form and dissolve, and your thoughts drift briefly, not forward, not backward, but outward toward what lies beyond this forest, beyond this narrow space where you exist, moment to moment. Capture. The word forms quietly. You do not dwell on it, but you do not ignore it either. Medieval punishments for outlawry were often severe, varying by region and time, but frequently involving public execution, imprisonment, or forced labour. And historians generally agree that the threat of such consequences shaped the decisions of those living in exile, influencing how they moved, where they hid, how long they risked staying in one place. You understand this now in a different way, not as distant knowledge, but as a quiet pressure that sits beneath every choice you make. You shift slightly, your back pressing against the packed snow wall, and you feel its cold, steady presence grounding you in the immediate moment, reminding you that survival is not about distant outcomes, but about what you do now. You listen again. A faint sound reaches you. Not close, not clear, but present. A distant echo of movement carried softly through the trees, too indistinct to identify, yet enough to remind you that the forest is never truly empty. You remain still, your breathing slow, your body relaxed but ready, and you let the sound pass without reacting, without drawing attention to yourself through unnecessary movement. Patience protects you. There are stories scattered and uncertain of outlaws who were eventually captured, not because of a single mistake, but because of small patterns, repeated actions that became predictable over time, allowing others to anticipate their movements. Historians continue to debate how accurate these accounts are, but the idea remains consistent. Unpredictability is survival. You take that in quietly. Your thoughts settle again, returning to the presence, to the rhythm of your breathing, the position of your body, the small controlled space you occupy within the larger indifferent forest. The cold deepens. You feel it clearly now, pressing at the edges of your shelter, seeping through the layers, testing your endurance once more. You adjust your cloak again, pulling it tighter, tucking your chin down, sealing in what little warmth remains. Small actions, repeated, essential. Outside, the darkness holds steady, and the forest continues its quiet existence, unseen but present, moving in ways you cannot fully perceive yet must always consider. You remain within your shelter, balancing awareness and rest, caution and endurance, your mind steady, your body conserving what it can. The night stretches ahead, long, cold, uncertain. But you have endured before, and you will endure again. One moment at a time. You notice the change before you fully understand it, a subtle shift in the air that feels less rigid, less biting, as if the cold has loosened its grip just slightly, though the snow remains deep and the forest unchanged at first glance. You open your eyes, aware that you must have drifted into a shallow rest without realizing it, and for a moment you remain still, listening, letting your senses adjust to the quiet once more. The darkness has softened. Not gone, but lighter at its edges. Dawn is approaching. You ease yourself forward, pushing aside the branches, and pale light filters in again, faint at first, then growing, reflecting across the snow in a way that feels different from the previous mornings. You step outside slowly, your boots sinking into the familiar depth, though you notice immediately that the surface feels slightly altered. Not softer, not harder, but subtly different, as if the snow has shifted in texture overnight. You pause, crouching briefly, brushing your hand across it, and you feel a faint dampness beneath the surface, a hint of moisture that was not there before. Not warmth, but change. You rise again, looking out across the forest, and you notice small details that confirm what you are sensing, the edges of branches glistening faintly. The snow clinging differently to surfaces, the air carrying a slightly heavier scent, less sharp, more grounded. Winter is still here, but something is shifting. You draw a slow breath, the air still cold but less biting than before, and you realize that even a slight change in temperature can alter everything. How snow behaves, how animals move, how long you can remain outside without losing heat too quickly. Small changes matter. Medieval people living through long winters would have recognized these subtle transitions, the gradual shifts that signal the slow approach of thaw, though historians continue to debate how accurately such changes could be predicted without consistent seasonal patterns. You take a few steps forward, scanning the ground, and you notice new tracks again, more numerous this time, crossing the surface in different directions, some shallow, others deeper, suggesting increased movement during the night. Animals are becoming more active, perhaps sensing the same shift you feel. You follow one set, briefly observing how it leads toward a cluster of low shrubs where the snow appears slightly disturbed, as if something has been digging beneath it. You do not interfere. Observation is enough. You step back, your attention widening again, taking in the broader landscape, and you feel a quiet sense of awareness settle in, a recognition that the environment is not static, that even in the depths of winter it continues to change, to move towards something else. You turn slowly, looking back toward your shelter, its low shape still blending into the surrounding snow, and you consider what this shift might mean for you, not immediately, but in the days ahead, how it might affect your ability to move, to find food, to remain hidden. Opportunity and risk. You return to the shelter your steps measured, and you pause before entering, listening once more, ensuring that the forest remains as quiet as it appears. It does. You slip inside, settling back into the familiar space, though it feels slightly different now, less closed, less final, as if the world outside has begun to open again just a little. You adjust your cloak, your posture, your position, and your thoughts drift briefly to the path ahead, not clearly defined, not certain, but present, a quiet awareness that this moment, like all others, is part of something larger, something that continues beyond what you can see. There are accounts suggesting that seasonal transitions often mark changes in outlaw behavior, increased movement, greater risk-taking as conditions shifted, and opportunities expanded, though historians still debate how consistent these patterns were across different regions and individuals. You consider this quietly, not as a plan, but as a possibility, something to hold in mind as you continue. You breathe slowly, evenly. The cold remains, but it is changing, and so are you. You remain still for a while after noticing the subtle shift in the air, letting the awareness settle rather than rushing to act on it. Because here change is rarely immediate, and reacting too quickly can be as dangerous as ignoring it entirely. The shelter holds its quiet shape around you. The packed snow walls firm, the branches steady, and for a moment you simply exist within it, breathing slowly, feeling the balance you have built between yourself and the cold. It has taken time and attention. Outside, the light continues to strengthen, though it remains pale, filtered through the winter sky, and you begin to sense how the forest is slowly adjusting, not in large movements, but in countless small ones, each barely noticeable on its own, yet together forming something different from the days before. You step out again, your movements careful but less hesitant now, and you take in the landscape with a wider perspective, noticing how the snow reflects the growing light more brightly, how the air feels slightly heavier, less sharp, carrying faint hints of moisture that were absent before. The world is changing, slowly. You walk a short distance from your shelter, your boots pressing into the snow, and you notice how your steps feel more certain now, not because the ground has changed significantly, but because you have your understanding of how to move, how to balance, how to conserve energy, all refined through repetition and necessity. You are not the same as when you arrived. That realization settles quietly, without urgency, without pride, just a simple recognition of what has been learned. There are stories passed through generations of outlaws who became something more than fugitives, figures who adapted so completely to the forest that they seemed to belong to it. Their movements quiet, their presence difficult to trace, their survival extending beyond what others thought possible. Some historians view these tales as exaggerated, shaped by folklore and storytelling, while others believe they reflect real individuals whose skills and awareness allowed them to endure in ways that were uncommon but not impossible. You consider this as you move, not as something distant, but as something you are beginning to understand from within the gradual shift, from reacting to surviving, from surviving to adapting. You stop near a cluster of trees where the snow has thinned slightly, exposing small patches of ground beneath, and you crouch observing the subtle differences, the way moisture gathers, the way the surface changes, and you recognize that these small openings may soon become more common, that the land itself is beginning to loosen, not yet, but soon. You rise again, turning slowly, taking in the full view of the forest around you, and you feel a quiet sense of connection, not comfort, but familiarity. A recognition that this place once entirely unknown now holds patterns. You can read signals, you can interpret paths you can follow. You return toward your shelter, your pace steady, your awareness still wide, and as you approach, you pause once more listening, confirming that the quiet remains undisturbed. It does. You step inside again, the familiar enclosure closing around you, and you settle into your place, your body adjusting quickly, conserving warmth, preserving strength. The day continues, but you feel its meaning differently now, not just as time to endure, but as part of a longer progression, something that moves beyond the immediate cycle of cold and hunger. You think briefly of the stories that will come from places like this, how nights like these, choices like yours, become part of something larger, something remembered, retold with shapes over time. Legends begin like this, quietly, without intention. Historians still argue about how much of these stories reflect reality and how much has been shaped by imagination, but they agree on one thing: that survival in such conditions leaves an impression, one that carries forward long after the moment itself has passed. You sit with that thought for a moment, then let it go, returning your focus to the present, to the steady rhythm of your breathing, the position of your body, the small controlled space you occupy within the vast changing forest. The light will fade again, the cold will return, but for now you remain, and that is enough. You remain within your shelter as the light begins its slow descent once more, the pale glow of day softening into the muted tones of evening, and this time the transition feels less abrupt, less threatening, as if you've come to understand its rhythm rather than simply endure it. Your body settles more easily now, your movements smaller, more efficient, each adjustment made with quiet intention rather than urgency. The cold still surrounds you. It always will, but it no longer feels like an unknown force pressing in from all sides. It feels measured, something you recognize. You shift slightly, pulling your cloak closer, and the familiar scent of smoke, pine and worn fabric rises gently around you, grounding you in the space you have shaped for yourself. The shelter holds steady, its packed walls firm, its narrow opening controlled, and for a moment you allow yourself to rest without scanning every sound, without tracking every shift beyond the branches, not fully relaxed, but close. The forest outside grows quieter again, though now you understand that quiet differently, not as emptiness, but as a kind of balance. A pause between movements, between events, between moments of decision. You breathe slowly, evenly, letting that rhythm guide you, and you feel the weight of the past days settle into something softer, less immediate. You have learned, not everything, not perfectly, but enough. There are accounts, often uncertain, of outlaws who endured entire winters in places like this, adapting step by step, learning through repetition, through failure, through small successes that built into something larger over time. Historians still debate how common such endurance truly was, whether these stories represent rare individuals or a broader reality shaped by the necessity and resilience. The truth remains unclear, but the possibility is real. You feel that possibility now, not as certainty, but as something within reach. Your hands rest quietly against your chest, the charm still there beneath your fingers, its surface worn smooth by time, and you hold it lightly, not for protection, but for the simple steadiness it offers. Outside, the air shifts gently, carrying faint sounds that you no longer rush to interpret, small movements that belong to the forest as much as you now do. You are part of it, for now. The cold presses in again as the last of the light fades, but you meet it differently, This time, adjusting your posture, conserving your warmth, settling into the narrow space with a quiet familiarity that did not exist before. Your breathing slows further deeper now, more even, and your thoughts begin to drift not toward plans or worries, but toward something softer. The memory of movement, the rhythm of steps through snow, the quiet crackle of hidden fire, the distant echo of wind through branches, all of it blending together. The forest holds those moments, and it holds you. You let your eyes close, not fully, not completely, but enough to rest within the steady rhythm you have found, and the tension that once filled every moment begins to ease, replaced by a quieter awareness that does not demand constant action. You have endured. That is enough. The night settles fully now, wrapping the forest in its deep, quiet stillness, and within your shelter, you remain, your breath slow, your beady. Still, your presence fading gently into the rhythm of the world around you, and as the cold continues, its patient watch you rest beside it, no longer resisting, no longer questioning, simply existing within the balance you have learned to keep. Sleep comes lightly, softly, without force. The forest remains, unchanged, endless, and you, for this moment, remain within it. The night deepens around you, and the world seems to soften at its edges, as if the forest itself is settling into a quieter version of its endless rhythm. Your breathing slows further, each inhale gentle, each exhale fading into the cold air without urgency. The shelter holds you in its small, steady embrace, and for the first time there is no need to adjust, no need to listen for every distant sound. Everything feels still. The weight of the past days drifts further away, not gone, but softened, like footsteps gradually covered by falling snow. You no longer trace every path, no longer measure every choice. Instead, you rest within what you have already learned, letting it carry you without effort. Outside the forest continues its quiet existence, branches holding snow wind moving gently between them, distant life shifting in ways that no longer demand your attention. It all blends together, now sound and silence, cold and breath, presence and distance. Your body relaxes more deeply, your thoughts slow. The cold remains, but it no longer feels sharp. It simply exists, part of the world around you, no longer pressing, no longer urgent. You drift, gently, as if carried by the same quiet rhythm that moves through the trees, through the snow, through everything that surrounds you. And in that stillness, there is nothing more you need to do, nothing more you need to hold, just rest. Sweet dream. Hams.